I have to kill someone, and I don't have much time. Another dark morning on Idun 12. The sun won't rise for another 12 hours. Our biorhythm is disconnected from nature. There is no harmony. We have uprooted ourselves. The face illuminated by the glaring neon lights is alien to me. I slowly run the palm of my hand over my cheek. The stubby skin feels like unpolished wood. There are open pores on my nose and forehead that I didn't know existed. I am 9 years old. I don't know why I'm sure I have to kill someone, but I know that it is certain. A clear voice inside my head tells me to. It's not an order, but an inescapable prophecy, the formulation of a simple truth. Class is boring today, even more than usually. The teacher keeps staring at me, stumbling over her material. She walks behind her desk, swipes over the screen with one hand, and wipes a drop of sweat from her forehead with the other. I sit in the back row. I like to be invisible. Not that I don't know anything. I know too much, and the other kids don't like that. But today I somehow like it when the teacher looks at me. Her sweaty blouse is clinging to her breasts. I raise my hand, but she ignores me. The break is unbearable. A dozen students stand around me, although I'm usually alone. They try to sound smart and watch me out of the corner of their eyes. I squat against the wall to hide my size. When the bell finally rings, they disappear into their classrooms. I sit for a moment, then I go home. The attention exhausts me. I lay in bed for 3 days. My father doesn't notice. He has to go to work before I get up and comes home when I go to bed. My mother died in childbed back on Earth. Shortly after, Dad applied for an engineering job on Idun 12. On my bedside table, next to the knife my father gave me for my last birthday, rests a small sphere covered with fine spikes. He brought it back from the mine 3 weeks ago. He said it reminded him of the chestnuts he collected as a child. A circular gap separates the sphere into 2 halves, held together by a torn skin on the inside. The outer shell feels mineral, but its appearance seems organic to me, as if something had grown inside and hatched. I search my tablet for hours, but only find pictures of chestnuts. In the evening, my father comes into the room and puts a glass of water on the bedside table. He looks tired and avoids eye contact. He asks me if I'm okay. Yes, I lie. He takes the sphere and rolls it on his palm. Then he walks to the window and stares at the indifferent universe. This black linen cloth, studded with small diamonds, is like a familiar blanket to me, but Dad has to take pills to carry its weight. He often talks about the blue sky on Earth. In the fall, the chestnuts fell from the trees in their green, spiky shells. After a while, they would turn brown, crack open, and reveal their smooth fruits, from which they made figurines and necklaces. For the first time, I wish there was an autumn on Idun 12. The narrow side corridor protects me from prying eyes. I know that Theo will pass by here soon. It's a shortcut that leads to his apartment building. His way to school, which is convenient for my purposes, is the only reason he has to die. This thought, the pure coincidence of life and death, makes me a little sad. The documents from Earth often speak of God, a being who controls these apparent coincidences. But God did not come to Idun 12 with us. He stayed on Earth. Out here, chaos decides who lives and who dies. In the end, it's only fair. Small metallic footsteps approach. It's my classmate. I'm all excited. I feel my brain scraping the inside of my skull. It's almost unbearable. He looks at me briefly and keeps on walking. I realize he doesn't recognize me. The beard, the muscles, I'm 3 heads taller than him. Theo is almost at the end of the alley. I bridge the gap with a few steps and grab his shoulder with one hand. I stab him with the other. The light body falls into my arm. How easy this is. I put him on the ground. 2 more stabs under the ribs. My preparations pay off. Theo gives up quickly. Then there's a tingling sensation in my head, and I pass out. When I wake up, it's dark. The dimmed night lights have been activated. Theo's body is gone, and I have a terrible headache. The walk home seems to take forever. I try to sneak into my room, but I hear my father's voice in the living room. He's sitting in his chair, smoking. When I tell him I got lost, I realize how stupid it sounds. Nobody gets lost on Idun 12. Every path is marked. Everything has a name or a number. But he just nods and lets me go. I stand in front of the bathroom mirror and stroke my cheek. It's soft and smooth. Everything is all right again. I am 9 years old. School is normal again. I sit in the back row and no one pays attention to me. Only the teacher looks at me reassuringly and smiles. Theo is there too. He sits in front of me as if nothing had happened. Nightmares are normal out here in space, the doctors say, but there are pills for that. Maybe I'll ask Dad to give me one of his. But the dream continues. I grow 10 centimeters in just 3 days. Then the stubble comes back and my voice gets deeper. Father is worried, even though he doesn't say anything. He's getting old. I have to do something so he can rest at home. The 14 hours a day he spends in the mine are enough to wear him out. The next day, I take my knife to school and wait for Theo in the alley. What worked once works twice, and it obviously didn't hurt him. But the person coming around the corner is not Theo, not the Theo I know. He's as tall as I am, as wide as I am, and has a fuzz over his upper lip. The new Theo stops in front of me. We understand each other.
The tingling in my head, it has to stop.
We take the train to another district and lock ourselves in the stall of a public restroom. Men come in and out, flushing the urinals or emptying their bowels. Finally, we hear the soft footsteps of a child. The door next to us squeaks. We quickly switch cells. Theo holds the boy by his arms and I plunge the knife into his body again and again. While Theo holds the boy's mouth shut, I quickly grab a roll of toilet paper from the dispenser and hastily wipe the floor. I know what's going to happen. Something hard keeps hitting my shoulder. It's the shoe of an old man standing over me, looking at me with disgust. He wants to know what we're doing here and why the floor is so dirty. He must be the caretaker. I look around. The boy is gone. Theo is lying next to me. I pick him up and drag him out of the toilet. The aging process sets in faster than before. Although I still don't understand much about my condition, I think the effect was reduced because Theo and I shared the child. We have to organize ourselves. We are a good team, but we need to expand our area quickly. Within a short time, there are many of us in every part of the station. We need a permanent solution. Theo sits on my bed. I tell him I need to try something. He nods like a sheep. I stab him in the neck with my knife and catch the blood with a shirt. The bleeding stops quickly. The shirt doesn't even drip. After half an hour, Theo wakes up and the wound is gone. I don't faint. My age hasn't been reset. There are complications. An old man we harvested panics and murders several people in the midst of a crowd and is arrested. Similar incidents repeat themselves. A girl refuses to kill and is suddenly older than her mother. The digital station newspaper is full of such stories. It can no longer be contained. There are no more secrets. Our next target are the guards. It only takes the conversion of a few of them to bring down their organization. Everyone who isn't one of us lives in fear. Everyone suspects everyone. First the schools close, then the shops, and finally the mine, the only reason we are all here. There's a curfew, but no one to enforce it. We are the majority now. Not long ago, we were masked wolves, walking among the sheep, but now we can bare our teeth. The harvest has become more difficult, but also more fun. We form small groups, chase people down, and round them up. The blood flows, the blood dries, and our number increases. Theo and I are on our own now. We don't need the others anymore. We steal a one-man battering ram from the guards and use it to smash down the door of our teacher's apartment. No one had been there for days. Theo stands in the entrance waiting for me to think of something, and I do. The school is untouched. None of the doors are damaged. I'm sure she's here. My footsteps echo in the empty corridors, the sound bouncing from one wall to the next. There is no stomping, no chattering, no giggling. It has never been this quiet. My knife scrapes against the metal wall. I place Theo between the two entrances. There is no escape. I find her in a storage room. She looks pretty, crouching on the floor, her hair a mess and her eyes wide open. A small child is standing next to her, looking at me with interest. The teacher is talking to me, but I can't hear the sheep anymore. I can only hear my knife, and my knife wants to drink blood. A sudden impulse makes me hesitate. My body, which must be about 13 or 14 years old, is flooded with an unknown energy. The tingling in my head is drowned out by a tingling further down. I lean over the teacher and push her to the ground with my blade. When the pressure is released, I plunge it into her stomach half a dozen times. The child staggers awkwardly across the windowless room. Her little feet leave red marks on the floor. I call for Theo to come and get his meal. At first it was about survival, but now I enjoy the harvest. I am creative. So many things can be cut or sliced. In the end, people don't care anyway. No one is angry, no one wants revenge. Under our rule, the station is more peaceful than it's ever been. Everyone is young and healthy. I'm not the only one infected with a lust for murder. The human population is quickly decimated to a small remnant that can no longer satisfy our hunger. We are running out of food. Anyone who finds a human kills him on the spot, even if their own bodies are still young. No one listens to me. No one talks about the fact that a wolf without sheep is worthless. Father has been locked up in our apartment for days. I ask him when the next resource shuttle from Earth is coming. Only when I threaten him with my knife does he answer. In 23 days. For the first time, I realize that I never felt any desire to kill him. He must have been converted before me. But how could he have survived this long? Of course, my premise was too self-centered. I'm not the origin. He is. He is Adam. He converted me.
Cyanide.
He says, answering my questioning look.
In the water.
My father keeps trying to convince me to contact the shuttle to have it turned back. He doesn't want any more people to be killed. I make it clear to him that his efforts are futile. He should come with me, but he won't. The sphere from the mine lies in his wrinkled hand as he confesses his sin to me. During the excavation, the workers found ancient ruins. There was life on Idun 12 before us. They had to keep it to themselves. The company wanted it that way. Investigations would have stopped the mining, or at least slowed it down. So everything was filled in again. Father smuggled the spiked orb into the station. He wanted to send it back to Earth on the shuttle for study. But one day, it was open and empty. So he forgot about it and gave it to me. I watch my father die. With each passing minute, his eyes drift further into his skull. He is panting heavily. One hand clutches the bloody sphere, the other rips holes in the armrest of his chair. I despise his morals, but admire his discipline. He ends up kneeling on the floor, holding his head and screaming at the ceiling. Then I hear a crack. The top of his skull is caved in. His body falls to the ground, and some kind of worm crawls out of his ear. It looks like a long grass root. It wriggles in the air for a few minutes, then gives up and withers away. I sit next to my father for several days, ignoring the knocking and ringing at the door. My body is already over 50 years old, a new record. I run my fingers along the wrinkles in my skin. I feel like I haven't eaten in 3 weeks. A headache is drilling into my brain like a blade. It's unbearable. I run out of the apartment. The demographics have changed rapidly. Old men and women are dragging themselves through the corridors. Even if they found a sheep, they would be too slow to catch it. A persistent screech echoes through the station. There are corpses everywhere, with exactly the same dent in their skulls as my father's. Next to them, if you look closely, are the dried-up grass worms. With great difficulty, Theo and I managed to lock 3 people in my room. Bound and gagged, they lie on the floor and on my bed. It doesn't matter who they are. With good rationing, the supply may last. I'm about 10 years older than Theo, so he'll claim 2 victims. Even if I save my sheep as long as possible, I'll be at least 70 and probably completely insane by the time the shuttle arrives. It's too great a risk. It's surprising how reluctant I am to kill Theo. I've already done it twice, but the connection between us has grown, like 2 plants sharing a root. I ignore the tinling in my head and wrestle him down. Then I push my knife through his lungs. It takes half an hour to separate his head from his body. Exhausted, I look at my work. Theo's eyelids begin to flutter and his mouth moves silently. I put his head under my armpit and poke the blade into his ear. Finally, the worm gives up and comes out. Although it has no eyes, it seems to be looking at me. Then it lies down on the living room floor and dies next to my father's origin worm, which has turned to dust. It would be too risky to leave the apartment. Out of boredom, I talked to my last person, a girl who was about to get married before we took over the station. She tells me in tears about her fiancé. He wanted to kill her. I realize that I am no longer receptive to such conversations and put the sock back into her mouth. A week before the shuttle arrives, I kill her and am glad she is gone when I wake up. The day of arrival. Freshly showered, combed, newly dressed, and with a strong body, I wait at the spaceport. There are only 2 other settlers with me, a man in his 50s and a young woman who tells me she's already 65 years old. The man says he used to work at the dock and could take over the communication with the shuttle. The crew is surprised by the empty port, but the woman tells them something about a strike. Then we kill them one by one. Fortunately, we understand much faster than humans. After a short recap of the events, we head back to Earth together. We gather in the cockpit. Only 5 of us survived the cryostasis unharmed, including the old girl. She tells me about Earth. Back then, before her journey to Idun 12, she was as young as she is now. The planet grows larger and larger. It stands out from the darkness of the universe with its blue oceans and white veil.
It's all ours now,
The woman says, stroking my head. I dream of a steel blue sky, the musty smell of autumn, and a soft chestnut in my hand.